Hey everyone, today we are joined by a star who's been seen in numerous wrestling promotions. He's been involved in wrestling for almost a decade. He's known for his time in DDT, Championship Wrestling, NWA, New Japan Pro Wrestling, and New Japan Strong, who has appeared in AEW, PWG, GCW, and so much more. Royce, sir, you've done so much. Thank you for joining us.
Hey, thanks for having me on, and I appreciate you doing your research and knowing what's up, man.
Yeah, I honestly tend to go a little overboard with the research with this channel. That's why we've done 3 interviews with Sal Renaro so far, and we got to I think 2006. So that tells you a lot about just how the conversations go. But the way I see it, I'd rather go in depth than just do a bunch of yes no answers. You know what I mean?
Absolutely, yeah, that's what we're here for. We're here to flesh stuff out and make it interesting.
Cool. Now we're gonna hit plugs in a second, but before we do, we got to talk about the big news. We agreed to this interview before the news came out, before it became public. You are going to be doing a big New Japan Strong show in Japan. Can you talk about that a little bit? Let people know where to see it, when to see it, and all the details behind it that you can possibly give.
Yeah, New Japan Strong Independence Day. It's July 4th and 5th, so American Independence Day. We are going to be in Japan. Both shows are at Korakuen Hall, the world famous, well, maybe the most famous for wrestling shows in Japan, and I'm excited. It's my first time being over there with Jarrell, with my tag partner. I've been over there a few times for DDT and for New Japan, but this will be my first time actually as the West Coast Wrecking Crew. So I'm super pumped up for that. We'll see what we have at the actual show in terms of the shows, excuse me, in terms of our matches. I don't know yet, but obviously, I'm sad about Mark Davis's injury. That's always a tragedy when another wrestler goes down. But with the strong belt being vacant, obviously we kind of have our eyes on that. So I'm hoping it's something along those lines.
No, absolutely. And it's so cool to see because New Japan Strong has been growing such an audience in the United States. So to see that brand being brought over to, the home of New Japan, that's super cool.
Yeah, and one thing I will say, not to jump ahead too much, but last year being there for the G1 tour, there were a lot of fans that were familiar with the strong product, that were wearing West Coast Wrecking Crew shirts and I mean, I brought some and sold them, but also the ones that were like, oh, those are like the first run that, so they must have just already been a fan and whatnot and known what was going on. So I'm excited. I'm excited to see how strong the brand does over there. I hope the fans really show out, and I hope they enjoy it because I know we're all going to be really working our butts off.
Awesome, awesome. Guys, be sure to show some support. And speaking of support, where can people check you out, possibly buy some merch? Just let people know where they can follow you and everything like that, please.
Yeah, at Royce Isaacs on Instagram, Royce Isaacs My High Samurai on Twitter, and Pro Wrestling Tees / Royce Isaacs if you want to buy a shirt, or if you catch me after a show, I still have a few of these West Coast Wrecking Crew shirts, the new design. Although I think honestly, by the time July 4th and 5th rolls around, we're probably going to end up hopefully shipping the rest of those for the Independence Day shows, but we'll see.
Super cool. And guys, we will have links to all of his social media. We have links to the Pro Wrestling Tees and probably to either New Japan's website or something like that. I'll have to look into specifically what it is, but the links will be in the description of every video, including the full one. So go show some support and of course give us a subscription too. That helps. All right. So let's just start right from the beginning. I know it's the generic thing, but I was raised in the quote unquote shoot interview era, right? I came up as a hardcore fan when you had the RF shoots, the high spot shoots, all these. So this was a natural question everybody asks, and I'm always hooked on it. When did you first see wrestling? Were you a fan of it? What were your initial thoughts? When did it click for you?
Yeah, I was lucky enough to uh, be a kid during the Attitude Era, so I think it was like wrestling was really cool then, and uh, it's like I had neighbors across the street that were into wrestling, and it made it very accessible and easy for me to be like, oh, this is really cool and enjoyable. And when you have like Stone Cold and The Rock on top, it's you know it would be hard not to, as an 8 or 9 year old kid, be like, oh yeah, this is sick. This is how I want to spend my days. And my dad was a wrestling fan, so we watched it together.
I can completely relate to that. I'm 31 years old, so that was kind of my sweet spot too, where
Yep.
you know, I actually watched it often with my dad. I can vividly remember we would watch it in his room, and during commercial breaks, I would fight an invisible X-Pac because for whatever reason he was the only one I thought I could beat at the time, and
Wow.
it's funny because I thought he was like, oh, he's such a small guy, and then he was like 6'1" and like 200 pounds or something. And in
Yeah.
retrospect, he's bigger than I am in height wise. So it's like I don't know why I thought it. I guess just the generation, when you're standing next to The Rock, who's 6'5", and he seems like average height at the time.
Yeah. People were absolutely massive in wrestling back then. It's pretty crazy. I mean, realistically, I would probably be around like cruiserweight if I was back. If you think about back then, like Chris Candido was a cruiserweight
That's
and he was
crazy.
220. And it's like, I'm 230 pounds. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? It's like I'm not much. It's 230, 235. So it'd be a way different time. But instead I'm like clearly in the heavyweight category these days.
It's interesting you bring that up, and this wasn't in the notes, but it is something I've noticed. You've always, from as long as I've seen you, and I've probably seen you 4 or 5 years at least of your career. So, at least half. And you were always in great shape. But I swear you're bigger now than you've ever been. Was that like an intentional thing where you're trying to get like bulky, more bulky and thick? Or was it just kind of the way life went?
So if you go back to before I started wrestling, in college I was really large, but I basically I grew up a chunky and a fat kid. I was athletic, but I also like I was legit 280, 290
All
pounds in
right.
college. uh I was an offensive lineman, so that's partly why, but also I had really bad eating habits, and I probably didn't work out as hard as I should have at the time. And so then from there I cut a lot of weight down to like the lowest I got was probably around like 205 or so. um and then slowly since then it's kind of been building up, building up, building up. I'm about maybe 230, 235 right now at this point. So it's one of those things that's just taken me some time to kind of build more and more muscle. But it's been kind of cool because I feel like obviously people wouldn't generally think of like your prime as being 34 years old, but I feel like I've managed to keep getting better and better every year. So and allegedly, the prime earning years of being a wrestler are your late 30s and early 40s. So, really, really hoping that one comes true for me. I could use that, but
That
but
is what
yeah,
I've heard
I've
though.
yeah, that is yeah, it makes sense because you're still maybe athletically you're not in your absolute prime, but you are enough close enough, and then you kind of like learn it's like Floyd Mayweather, like late in his career where he knew all the wily tricks, where
Hmm.
even if his athleticism was an 8 or a 9 out of 10 compared to a 10 or 11 before, he knew all the different like tricks of the trade and how to be well rounded. It's like you learn how to really perform and work to a crowd and all that kind of stuff. So I don't know, I think it's my goal personally is to be an active wrestler until I'm 50. We'll see. We'll see if that actually happens and how creaky my body is at that point. But I would really like to stay in good shape and stay active, like as in not just wrestling once or twice a year, as in being an active participant in wrestling quite often. So I want to keep my body in good shape. I want to work hard. I care about working out. I enjoy it obviously for the wrestling side too, but it's also like to be corny about it, about like every other meathead, it's my therapy. So
Hey, it's awesome that you're doing it, and the work is very evident to anybody who's been following you. So you're doing something right, that's for sure.
thank you.
Now, back to when you were a fan, who were some of your favorite wrestlers growing up? Did you necessarily they didn't necessarily have to influence your work later on? They could have just been people you gravitated towards.
Yeah, I mean, like Stone Cold and The Rock, growing up in the Attitude Era, were gonna obviously be the tops of it. I was a big fan of Kane and Mankind because I thought the masks and like the kind of the dark side was pretty cool. I was more of a WWF at the time guy than WCW, but like the Outsiders were, the epitome of cool. My neighbor that I mentioned earlier and I would do like the too sweet, and I was like, oh, real cool 9-year-olds. Like, this is pretty sick. Booker T and DDP, Scott Steiner. I was a fan of all those guys. So, a typical kid, I liked all the top guys.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense though. Was there ever like, and we'll get into disliked wrestlers in a minute because I find that to be fascinating too. But you talk about liking The Rock and Austin. Was that ever an issue for you because there were so often rivals? Because, for example, for me, The Undertaker was my favorite growing up, right? And I loved Austin until he would wrestle Undertaker. And then I was like, no, Austin, you can go to the side. But then I would take him right back. But then you had someone like The Rock or Shawn Michaels, who at the time I despised as a kid just because they always wrestled my favorites. Like, they were always wrestling Austin or Taker or Foley. Right. And I was like, no, I don't like you because you're always wrestling people I like.
I think I pretty much always liked both of them no matter what, even if they were feuding. That was just like, oh, like this is like the two coolest guys fighting. But if I had to pick one, and this might, get me kicked out of the running for being in the Jungle Cruise 2 movie, but I definitely am an Austin guy over The Rock.
No, I totally get it. But you know what, Rock, he's waiting for the call. So, I know you're going to be watching this video, obviously. So come on, give him a call. Disliked wrestlers. And generally, this is a compliment. You know what I mean? Like, sometimes people will answer a little more judgmental, but I look at it as a compliment. If you're a kid and you dislike a wrestler, normally that means they're doing their job right. So was there some who just drove you crazy, or were you just so into wrestling that you kind of just loved it all?
I think like the best example I can think of it is I was younger and I didn't really know the ins and outs of wrestling and like the business for sure back then. But there was something about Goldust where like when he was on screen, I hated him, but like there was some kind of like there was that feeling of like he's kind of awesome at what he does. You know what I mean? Where it's like he really did do a great job of being a heel, because it was like, I don't know, I didn't get it then, but I still kind of got it, where I was like, man, like I love hating this guy.
Yeah. And he's crazy where I think he's in his 50s now. I can't remember exact age. Yeah. He practically moves better than he did then, but he's an example of what you're talking about earlier, where, his mind is at an 11 now, where even if it was at an 8 before, he's still doing such incredible work. It's insane.
Yeah, he's phenomenal. He's still going in ring. Everything is like, I don't know. He is like Mr. like, you still got it, clap, 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 clap type of thing to me. Seeing someone like that wrestle at his age as well as he does is really, that's an inspiration. That's something we should all strive to achieve. I look at someone like him or like Yuji Nagata, who I'm like, wow, like that is, if we could all be so lucky to have amazing careers like that and then still be able to perform at such high levels, that's just crazy to me.
And keep the passion, because that's a thing that, just from talking to people as often as I do, it's really easy to become jaded, to get frustrated, because let's face it, wrestling is a very tough industry, physically, mentally, emotionally, every way you can think about it. There's a lot of hard aspects, and it would be really easy to grow to hate it. So the fact that you can keep that passion after all this time, I think it speaks volumes.
I agree.
So now let's talk about getting into wrestling. Did you always know you wanted to be a wrestler, or was that something that came later?
So I probably stopped watching wrestling at some point in like towards the end of high school. I kind of just fell out with it. And then at the end of college is when I actually got back into it. My boy AJ, who was a fellow offensive lineman with me, he was actually at the last year at the New Japan show in Chicago. Shout out to AJ. But I was watching wrestling. I started watching wrestling again with him because he was a big fan, and I think like I was really like Dolph Ziggler. Like I'm still a huge Ziggler fan,
Yeah.
but like at the time, like that was like my guy where I was, oh, this guy fucking rules. Like he's awesome, and yeah, it was just I guess later when I got back into like so when I was in at the end of college slash graduated, I think that's when I kind of just I don't know if I was like I should do this, but I just thought there was something that connected with me where I was like, well, I really enjoy being an athlete and doing athletics, and there's something about the show of it that like the presentation and the all the pomp and circumstance of rest. I was like this is cool. Like this is something I would want to do. I didn't know it would necessarily take a hold of me the way it did, but I wanted to give it a shot for sure. And I was working like I was a personal trainer and then a fitness manager and then I was in retirement home sales and I was doing well at these jobs. Technically, I would be getting good promotions and I'd be making really good money. And I don't know, my life was just kind of empty. Like I just didn't I don't know, it just didn't complete me. It didn't make me happy. I would, you know, make really good money, especially for my age, and like no real responsibilities and whatever. But I would just like, you know, like party on the weekends and just kind of like leave it all feeling hollow and just like not. I wasn't happy. So eventually, it was like, okay, yeah, I really want to give wrestling a try, and maybe it can be like I didn't think it'd be a job or whatever, but maybe it could be something kind of fun to like occupy my time and make me happier. And by the time I was done with my first wrestling practice, I was like, okay, I need to like find a way to make this like my living, like as much as part of my life as I possibly can. I just knew. And wrestling practice sucks. It hurts. Everything hurts, but I was still just like, yeah, this is awesome.
Okay, so with your training, can you talk about how you found the school? Because we talked to a lot of people from various different backgrounds on the channel. For example, we just interviewed Caprice Coleman a couple days ago, and he started training in like '97 or something to
Yeah.
that effect. Obviously, the internet and everything was much different then than it was when when you started. Was it just a case of, hey, I'm going to look up a school on Google and then you found a place, or is it, hey, I have a friend who knows about this place? How did that happen?
Um, I I was looking at schools online because I couldn't find anything around me in Denver. And I was like, do I need to just like move cross country and like find a school somewhere? Like, I knew like Heath Slater had like a school in Atlanta. I was like, maybe I should just like move to Atlanta and try stuff there. And then I went to a local show in Denver called Lucha Libre and Laughs that still runs. I do their shows actually quite often now, and I remember watching the show and just being okay, like this, I could get involved in this. Maybe I can talk to someone that is here and see how I do that. So I talked to Nick Gossert, who is the promoter for Lucha Libre and Laughs, and he was like, "Well, go train at this place called the Butcher Shop." They still do training, I believe, but my trainer Lonnie Valdez is my trainer, and I don't believe he still. Yeah, I want to say that my class was actually like the last class that he trained, and I got really really lucky. Lonnie was a phenomenal trainer. He didn't he didn't end up traveling a lot like in his own career, but he was very athletic and like well rounded, and he was like a lot of trainers are like, you're going to learn this way, and this is how I teach it, and this is how it's supposed to be done, and this is what's right. But he was very like, as long as you execute it and it looks good and it's safe, I don't care if someone else gives you the tip. I don't care if it's not my technique, but I tell you, okay, we'll try it this way and it works. Like, what works as long as it's safe and looks good, that's what you should go with. And and yeah, so I started training literally like 2 days after the show with Lonnie Valdez, and I mean I had nothing else going on in my life other than work at that time and working out, and he was going through a divorce, and so we were just training pretty much like 5 days a week. They would have like three scheduled practices, and then like I would just call him up, like, "Hey man, I'm gonna be at the butcher shop. Can you come down and So I was getting basically all these like one-on-one sessions, and I think that's really what kind of helped me learn so fast. Was I was just like I did like an intensive camp basically on how to learn how to wrestle type of thing.
How big was your class? Because I know that's something that it really varies. You know, sometimes you'll have literally 3 to 5 people in a group, and they're just learning under a trainer. And then you'll find some that actually have 20 people, 30 people, and then obviously you have the extremes like the uh, performance center, which has like 100 people. But
Yeah, so it was a smaller class. It was 4 people. Um, Only one of the other people still wrestles. That's Cody Devine. He's injured right now, but he's a good Colorado wrestler. He's mostly wrestled there, and he's done some like he's like wrestled Hood Slam and a couple places in San Diego and stuff like that before. But he's mostly like a Colorado guy. But it's still one of my good friends that I talk to quite a bit. And he's good. He's talented. He's stuck with it. And then there was Danny Troy, who I think he owns a gym now or something. He's like in crazy good shape, but he's been in the fitness world for a long time, and I think he just never quite like he was like already a grown up with kids and well with a kid, excuse me. I think now he has multiples, but he basically I think kind of realized I'm never going to be able to dedicate enough of my time to this to really make it a thing. And so he quit quite a few years back actually. Probably he was probably like 2 or 3 years in, and then he quit. And then kind of the craziest story, save the best for last. What I shouldn't say best, the wildest for last. This kid, Darshan, he he was uh, he was really good. Like he was our leader at first. We had this 4-person group called the Upgrades, and he led our group. And he could do anything. I remember watching him learn how to like moonsault by basically like our trainer kind of talked him through it, and then he just like pondered it for a minute, and then he just did a perfect like picture perfect moonsault
total
right
natural.
there. Yeah, very natural. Like he could do all the power moves too. He would like Darshan was just he was really really good at wrestling, but um to say the least, Darshan had a dark side, and he fell out with us wrestlers. Like I don't know, it was really tough. That was like a tough thing on me because like we got really close. Like me, him, and Cody went out for his birthday one time, and it was like, oh man, like I've never like had like a birthday celebration. It was like sad. Like I've never like had like a birthday celebration like this, and we're like, dude, we're at like Red Lobster, bro. Like that's tough. He had a really tough home life, and it started manifesting where he just like he would just get into a lot of conflicts with local wrestlers over just dumb shit, like just stuff that shouldn't, you know, just have good communication and be nice to each other. Like the scene's not big enough for everyone just to be fighting over stupid shit. And then he was really disrespectful to a few people who had been around quite a bit longer than him. And then he disrespected our trainer. And eventually, it was they were gonna kind of just basically nix him as the leader of our group. But like we'll kick him out and then we'll kind of punish him for a little bit. Not we, but like the promoter was gonna like punish him, put him on the bottom of the card for a couple months, and then build him back up where it'd be like a storyline where it'd be me versus him. But he just didn't really. He was at a point where he didn't want to hear anything from anyone, so he didn't want to be punished. And it's like this is like local Colorado wrestling. Who cares if they put you at the bottom of the card for a couple months? Like they're you know what I mean? Like this is like a learning experience, and like this is everyone wanted Darshan to win. Everyone wanted him to stick around. He it's just like one of those things where sometimes if you're going around and you're being a jerk to everyone and you're ruining your reputation, you need to be put in check. And he just didn't want to hear it. And I know he had a lot of mental health struggles after that. He stopped really coming around or hanging out with us. He a few like maybe 5 years ago, uh I don't know, he got into some altercation with the police, and then he got tased, but it was found to be unlawful, so he won a settlement. And then it all escalated, and he had some issues with his parents, and he ended up he killed his sister. He's in jail right now.
Jeez. Wow.
He killed his sister and like left her in like a trash can. And
Jesus.
yeah, I don't know. It sucks because like that was my bro, and I wish I wish things could have turned out differently. And I think like little things here and there, like even if he wasn't going to be, like the next big star in wrestling, which I mean, first of all, I think he absolutely could have been. He was like, I want to say maybe 3 or 4 years younger than me. So like he would just be like 30 at this point kind of thing. Like he had all the potential in the world. And I think a few places, if he would have just turned right and he veered left instead. And unfortunately, he's going to live out the rest of his life, behind bars. But I don't know. It's a real tragedy. It's a real sad situation.
It really is, and yeah, it's such an interesting the human dynamic because like you said, if someone just went left instead of right, it could have been a completely different situation. And then mental health is obviously a big deal, and wrestling's finally kind of embracing that more and being more accepting of it, because let's face it, for a long time wrestling was a very macho industry where mental health wasn't something that was even taken into consideration. And now there's a lot that can be said, good and bad, about any generation, including this one. But at least one thing that is better is they're taking mental health and general health more into account, which I think is a good thing.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with everything you're saying. It's it's really important that we address that stuff and that we like yeah, mental health is our health. And yeah, there was a lot of bad practices back in the day that I'm glad are kind of gone now.
So with your training, do you know roughly how long you were training before your first match? Like, was it a 6 month thing, a year thing?
Oh gosh. It was more like a 2.5 month thing.
Oh wow.
It was supposed to be 6 months. Um my trainer had these very specific, like it was supposed to be 6 months, and he wanted me to have like 50 practice matches. Um and I could only wrestle someone a maximum of 5 times. So I'd have 10 different opponents. And then like 10 of them I think had to be cold matches or something like that. Um and then I was making my way through them pretty fast. And the promoter of the promotion, it's called Primos. Uh, they were just like, "Hey, we're running at the end of June, and we want you guys on there." And that's when Lonnie kind of came up with the upgrades faction, put us all together. It was like, "All right, well, we'll put you guys all together, so you don't have to like do like a singles match or anything super crazy." And I just jammed in as many. I don't know if everyone finished their full practice matches, but I think I did. I like jammed in as like I was doing multiple a day leading up to it. Um, but yeah, it definitely wasn't like ideal. Like, I would have liked a little bit more time maybe, but at the same time, I do think getting out there and performing for audiences did also just teach me certain things where it's like, okay, like there's only so much that you can learn with no audience when you're just practicing. And I mean, I was 25, so it was like whatever. Like let me just I didn't mind just jumping kind of into it headlong. I definitely think I was lucky that I'd also been, versus like doing a couple sessions a week, I was training 5 days a week. So that definitely helped rush me along. And then I was traveling as soon as humanly possible and just like getting myself out there and working as much of a variety of shows and then getting myself that kind of experience, because I think that was really important for me too to grow.
So specifically with your first match, obviously my notes were incorrect. What I found was what I thought was to be your first match, at least from online research, was with Lonnie, actually your trainer, which is super cool, at the Ratio Rumble on August 18th, 2015. That turns out is not your first match because you had a multi-man match. Do you remember who the match was with, who the first man, and how long before this was?
This was June 29th, 2014.
Oh wow, okay,
So
well, big
almost a
difference.
whole year before. But like also Colorado wrestling was like not really like super well documented. Like
Mhm.
a lot of that stuff like you couldn't find that on a cage match or anything, I'm sure. I think it's on YouTube because every once in a while I find it on YouTube. Like the ending of it, like our finisher was actually really fucking sick. Like
What was
we
it?
did I picked a dude up in a power bomb and Darshan hit off the ropes. Darshan was so crazy. He jumped so high and gave the dude like a sick ass lariat. Like he didn't come off the turnbuckle or nothing. He like just jumped and it looked absolutely brutal. He just hit the ropes, jumped like crazy high in the air and lariated the fuck out of this guy. It was honestly dope. I post it on my Instagram every once in a while. It's probably somewhere on there. But like buried deep.
Do you remember who your
But
opponents were?
yeah, okay, so it was us for the upgrades versus Bruce Rogers, who's still wrestling in Colorado. He's a local guy. This guy Robert Romero, who I don't know if he's still wrestling. He might be, but if he is, it's probably just for primos, and that's about it. And then this guy Ben Ledoux, who's like a fan now. He sometimes, I think every once in a while he wrestles, but he's mostly a wrestling super fan. Uh, oh, and this guy Xander, who I think he's like quit a couple times. I'm pretty sure he's done wrestling. But yeah, it was a classic 4-on-4 in Club Fuego Fuego. It's like I'm not short, but I'm not the tallest guy, and not even in boots, but in like just shooter shoes. So basically, my exact height on the second rope, my head was touching the ceiling.
Oh
So not
Lord.
exactly like an ideal, not exactly ideal for wrestling in there. But we had like a really good crowd. There was, I don't know, 300-400 people there probably. It was like packed, and terrible lighting. It was all this like blue, like overpowering blue light. But but it was fun. I was like, yeah, this is the greatest. This is all I want to do. I was in love.
That's super cool. And you mentioned, the Colorado scene, and that's another thing I like to dive into because there's some really interesting scenes from the people I talked to. For example, I talked to Tyler Bateman, who actually messaged me not long before this to both bring up the fact that he has a lot of respect for you and that he plans to do a number on you in June. So I'm just throwing that out there, even though this will be posted after that, so we'll see what the
Yeah,
results end up being. But just throwing that out there.
yeah. I wouldn't expect any less of him. Me and him have. I mean, I've wrestled him probably like double digits amount of times, and there's been bloodshed and all that. But it's all respect. I'm gonna do a number right back on him. So I
Perfect.
I I ain't scared.
But the thing I was going to get at, he's from Oklahoma originally, so he had
Yeah,
this Oklahoma wrestling scene. Tim Storm was from Arkansas. You had Yuma doing California. You had Sal doing like the Carolinas. You had who else? Caprice in Georgia. So as you can see, it's very spread out. What was
yeah.
the Colorado scene like? Because it's not exactly somewhere that's known as a hotbed, but I'm curious about if there was a lot of wrestling because you talked about traveling early, which a lot of people don't do. So I'm curious about that as well.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie. It was dog shit. No, it was not great to be honest. Um, it was rough when I got in. It's in a much better place now. Um, there were a few different shows in town as well as a couple lucha shows, but I think it was such a like okay, so especially back then there was a lot of infighting and like, oh, if you work this show then you can't work that show. So I think that's partly why I knew I needed experience, and so I was doing lucha libre and laughs, and I was doing primos, which were kind of my home promotions, and then every once in a while I could do new era or it was called NRW, it's called RMP now.
And how
But
far were these all apart? Were these like an hour, within 2 hours, or were they like across state?
oh no, they were all within, everything was in Denver,
Okay.
really. So like these are all, whatever, 30 minutes from each other or something. But like also it's not like anyone was really lighting the world on fire back then. So like it was just kind of silly and territorial of everyone, oh, don't do this show, don't do that. It's like, guys, we all just need to get better at wrestling, to be honest. So I think that was part of my thing though, was I was like, okay, well, I can't just do these two shows and some random lucha shows and get better. So pretty quickly I was traveling and going to like NWA Top of Texas, which was in Amarillo, or like UCW Zero, which was in Utah. I was like, let me get myself out there and try to make some connections and whatnot. And then UCW led to me kind of meeting some people like Hammerstone who hooked me up with Paragon and stuff like that. So then I was able to travel even more, and then I'm going to Vegas and whatnot. And eventually, I was working all the Denver shows, and they're like, I mean, the quality in Denver is much better now. Lucha Libre and Laughs has blown up so much that like they every time they sell out and they'll do like we have in the it'll be after this airs, but like they're doing a 2 day event um at the beginning of June, and like both days will be crazy, like sold out. The Oriental Theater, the O, excuse me. It's what the theater's name is. But they'll probably have like 600 people there, standing room only.
Oh
And
wow.
they yeah, it's like a crazy good crowd. Honestly, the biggest thing with that is they need to get into streaming, because fans would love that show streamed, because they do stand-up comedy in between matches, and it's like a great environment. It's like a great wrestling environment. I think the problem is the theater is not very good for like, it's got like a bunch of old thick walls that would make streaming a little bit harder, but their stuff on YouTube is phenomenal. um this place called New Era Wrestling that just shut down after 13 years. They were building something really cool there. Like they had like 400 to 500 people, I want to say, on their last couple of shows. In at their last couple of shows, I had a strap match with a young up and coming talented kid, Logan Austin from Denver. And so like there is some better quality wrestling, I would say, for sure, than when I started out, but the scene was definitely not great when I came into the scene. But I think that was part of like not to my own horn or pat myself on the back too much, but I think for young kids who were all in relatively good shape and could work somewhat, like that helped develop the scene a little bit. Like it was like, oh,
Yeah.
we got to kind of all step our game up, and like there's some new kids in town and whatnot. And there were some other young up and comers at other schools too that were like in fairly decent shape. Or then he now goes by Dak Draper. At the time, he was Sammy Six Guns. He had gone to NXT, and then he'd gotten fired and come back. And so him coming back and being, I mean, if people are not familiar, you should be. But if you're not, he's like 6'5", 250. He's jacked. He's handsome. He can cut a promo. He can wrestle really well. So like someone like that had that NXT experience coming back and kind of helping teach us and improve the scene and show people how it's supposed to really be done, I think helped a lot too.
It's funny you bring up Dak Draper because probably an hour before this started, I reached out to him to hopefully talk to him on the channel in the future. He's in the NWA now. He had a stint in Ring of Honor, so that would be a lot of fun.
Yeah, he's great.
With the Colorado scene evolving like it has, which is great news because the West Coast has had a hard time with wrestling, right? Like there's obviously certain places, New Japan Strong, Pro Wrestling Gorilla, some stuff in Texas, but the West Coast as a whole doesn't quite get the wrestling love that the East Coast does. So the more places, that there can be work there that matter and that streams, because that's one thing that I can imagine getting back on the subject of traveling, so difficult. You have to travel so far if you want to travel. If you're in New York, you have Philadelphia, Connecticut, Massachusetts, New Jersey, like everything is within like a 6 to 8 hour drive. While for you, 6 to 8 hours, how far like would you even get out if from Colorado if you went like 6 hours north or west?
If you went west, you'd be in Utah, maybe about the Salt Lake. So that's about as far as you're getting. If you go south, you'd still be in the mountains, but you'd be on the New Mexico side probably, and not super far from Albuquerque. If you went east, you'd be in Nebraska, so that's massive downgrade. Sorry, guys. And if you went north, I'm pretty sure you'd either be at the tip of Wyoming or something. It wouldn't be great. So, I mean, yeah, I would say definitely moving to the West Coast was a much better move in terms of the amount of good shows that I can get to now. But it's still, yeah, not the same as if I was on the East Coast. There's a lot more options that are close by. And it is what it is. I definitely think there is an East Coast bias to a lot of like indie wrestling, and I don't know, at the end of the day, like I think West Coast has some insanely underrated wrestlers, some people with some crazy good work rate that don't get the flowers that they deserve. And I think the good thing is now things are finally starting to turn around a little bit. Like we do have stuff like New Japan Strong, we do have, West Coast Pro and Prestige and Defy and all these shows that are, I think, a little bit more highly respected and known as like, work rate shows and whatnot.
And it's getting a little more trendy because for a long time it felt like the only trendy West Coast promotion was PWG, and that's
Certainly.
changed. So,
Yep.
what were some of your early goals in wrestling? Because you talked about how you saw Dolph Ziggler and then you went to the show and you said, "Oh, I think I could do this." But where was your head at? Because now we know your goal is, "Hey, I want to wrestle until I'm 50. I want this to be, my career, this and that." At that point, were you like, "Hey, I want to go to WWE," or "Hey, I want to go to Japan," or "I just want to make this a job," or "I just want to do it"?
Yeah, I definitely wanted to go to Japan immediately when I got into it. Like that was definitely a very immediate goal. Other than that, I do think I had more like WWE aspirations, and I think I don't know, yeah, the typical like, oh, I'll be like world champion by the time I'm 30, and it's like here I am 9 years later, and I still haven't even gotten signed or any of that kind of thing. So, uh, yeah, it's I think I had like the typical uh kind of, yeah, I wanted to go to WB and become champion, but I definitely do remember wanting to go to Japan. That was always like a goal for sure for me. So, hey, 50% ain't bad.
No, hey, and you like you said, you're in my opinion, at 34, you're barely in your prime when it comes to wrestling. So I think you have a lot of time left to reach any goal you want. And plus, nowadays, you don't even have to. And that's the cool thing. The business is doing so well. There's so many places you can work and make a name for yourself. It's funny though, you brought up that, youthful bravado because someone I know, you know, I can remember this quote. This has no relevance whatsoever, but it's just funny to me. I remember him being like, "Oh yeah, I want to be a manager. I'll be better than Paul Heyman." That was his quote before even attending one show, like one practice. Went to a practice, never went back, and
Perfect.
there's just something that stood out to me. I'm like, "Oh, youthful ignorance can be something else."
Yeah, no, it's like the equivalent of like yeah, I don't know like any kind of fighting skills, but when I get mad, I black out. And it's like, no, you're gonna black out from the guy choking you out because he knows what he's doing, dude.
With the traveling, that's funny. With the traveling, so you talked about how you knew you had to travel to get better, but did you also kind of realize the realities of like, I need to travel to get my name out there? Was that also part of it?
Yeah, I definitely think that was. And a lot of wrestling is like who do you know and networking and whatnot. And
Yeah.
I don't know if I realized that immediately, but like pretty quickly it was like, oh yeah, like that probably makes sense to me. And it was definitely cool. Like once I did start traveling to places and meeting people that I was like, oh, okay, like now I know a guy that wrestles in this area and I can, at least like, hey, what's up, man? Do you know any places I should be looking at, or do you mind putting in a word with so and so or whatever? So like I do think I kind of caught on to that pretty quickly, but I was lucky despite my trainer not really traveling a lot, he did impart to me that it was smart and that's how to get myself out there a little bit fairly early. So that was definitely like the blueprint I followed.
And the fact that you're willing to network's a big thing too, because let's face it, that is something it's such a tricky, line. Like even for what I do, not even anything to do with wrestling itself, but you're like, at what point is it bothering someone if you send another email asking an interview? You know what I mean? And for you, you have wrestling heat where everything, it's really easy to overthink everything in wrestling. So was it something where you were immediately like, I'm going to ask promoters for bookings, I'm going to throw my name out there? Or were you like, well, should they come to me? Like, was it tough for you to balance that? Or did you know instantly, I need to make contacts myself and I need to put in the work?
Yeah, I don't know. I guess probably from being in sales, I realized that you just have to put yourself out there and keep trying to hit people. Like I mean, I still hit promoters now
Mhm.
and get turned down all the time. It happens. That's just kind of like you have to be comfortable with the rejection side
Yeah.
of it. It doesn't matter like what level you're on. You can't be like, oh well, New Japan said yes to me, so mom and pop pro can't turn me down. It's like no, like none of us are really above any of this stuff. It's like, do you want to work or do you want to not work? So if you want to work, you got to just be comfortable hitting people up and getting rejected. And you know, if not, if you're just waiting to be like, well, I'm the prettiest girl at the dance, so someone should ask me to dance, like you're gonna end up not dancing a whole lot. And I love wrestling. Like I love the actual act of wrestling in ring is like it's my favorite part about it. It's not like any of the other crap that comes with it. Like all that is extra. I love the part where I'm in the ring wrestling. So if I can do that more, then great. Um, so all the networking and all the hitting up promoters and whatever, that's like the part that you kind of just have to do. So it is what it is.
If you won't advocate for yourself, no one else will. That's,
Certainly.
one of the early matches I saw in your career, which I would assume, because normally a question I ask is, who was the first quote unquote name you wrestled? And I don't know if this is going to be the person. If not, we can do another story on that. But the earliest one I saw was yourself, Chris Hero, and Sammy Six Guns, who I didn't realize at the time actually was Dak Draper. So that's pretty interesting. Was that match with Chris Hero was from May 8th, 2016. Was that your earliest name that you wrestled?
Yeah, probably. It was probably him. I think so. That was a really fun match because man, I was still really green and didn't know what the fuck I was doing. And Chris is a consummate professional, and I mean that, yeah, Chris Hero is
What a
crazy good at
wrestler.
wrestling. He's literally, yeah, the reason there's a reason he's called the wrestling genius. And it's pretty cool that he's working with West Coast Pro now too. So I get to work with him in that capacity as well. And yeah, I think that match helped me a lot. There was a lot of like little things that I just picked up on, and I got to take a seminar. I want to say maybe like the next day. Maybe he did a seminar on a different time that he came to Colorado, but I think it was that time. And so it was like there was a lot of stuff that I really picked up on, and yeah, I think Wrestling Genius is definitely like the way to describe it because he's very very sharp and he clearly really puts his mind to a lot of things in a really meaningful and mindful way.
Was it? I'm guessing he's the one who put the match together, given his experience. But was it something where, he was really looking for your feedback, or were you so green at the time? Where like, he asked what you can do, you tell him what you can do, and he kind of just puts it all together.
No, definitely. I think all all the all the good names I've been in there with are pretty open to like if you have good ideas, as long as you're presenting them in a respectful way. It's only like the people that like aren't really that good that have these massive egos that kind of it's an issue putting stuff together where it's like, I mean, yeah, if you have a terrible idea, they should definitely shoot you down, but
Yeah.
like it's really it's like you really have to be like, I don't know, just think of really a lot of yourself, which I think if you're actually good, you kind of tend to be somewhat more humbled where you're like, you care about the match and you care about wrestling. So you're not just going to be like, oh, you, you're trying to tell me that you have an idea for a spot. Like,
Yeah.
um,
And hey,
so
look,
no, like, yeah,
from the veteran perspective, especially if you want to teach and make people better, if you gave him an idea, like if I was a veteran and you gave me an idea, I would think, maybe the idea sucks. Maybe the idea is good. If it's bad, maybe I can tell you why it's bad, but in a polite way
sure,
to try to teach you. Or, obviously it depends on the person, I guess, if they're a jerk
sure.
or not. But it seems
Or
like
if
a
you just
tool to learn.
change around one little thing and now it's a much better spot. And
Mhm.
then it also teaches me, oh, like, cool, you had the right idea, but not quite or whatever,
Mhm.
versus like, I don't know. You have to be kind of an egomaniac to just be like, nope, I'm just going to turn down everything and be disrespectful. That's like usually people that are like 50-mile vets where it's like, okay,
Yep.
buddy, we're getting paid the same thing. I don't know what you think, but, calm down.
The 12-year vets who've only wrestled in one town for 12 years. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And hey, look, if that's what you want to do, there's nothing wrong with that. But it just depends on the ego that you have with it.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with doing wrestling as like there's no real other than just are you signed to WWE or something. There's not like it's not like the NBA where it's like you're in the NBA or you're playing on a street and we can tell the difference. There's like a huge difference. It's like you kind of everyone's just kind of mixed and mingled together really for the most
Mhm.
part, other than if you're signed to WWE. And even if you're signed to WWE, in 5 years you may not be, and then
Yeah.
you're mixed and mingling with everyone. And so there's not that like distinction. So you'll have a lot of people that kind of just don't really ever put in the work or put themselves out there, and they still want to be viewed as these big respected vets and whatnot. And it's like, I don't know, it's just kind of silly because usually the people that you do really respect and like and that do like have these great opinions and are going to help you out don't have that big ego. They're just like cool, normal dudes. And that actually gives you that respect of, wow, like that dude was awesome. That guy helped me out so much. And he's really humble versus like the people that are kind of like up their own asses. It's usually like, hey man, like that's not really that impressive that you've been working at this. Like if you were working at a supermarket and you were still just like the fucking checkout guy after 12 years and never got a raise, like that'd probably be like a negative indication instead of me being like, wow, you're a vet. However, if you're just like trying to do it for fun on the weekends, if you're just a weekend warrior and you don't have an ego about it and you're like, yeah, I don't want to travel because I have a family and I don't want to do this and do that and put up with whatever. If you just want to do wrestling as a hobby, there's literally nothing wrong with that. That's totally fine as long as you're still like up enough on the training that you're safe in the ring and that you have a good demeanor and all that. Like there's literally nothing wrong with doing wrestling and not being like I have to be the number one in the world if I'm not trying to beat Okada next year. You know what I mean? Like that's
Yeah.
okay.
I'm sure you can quickly tell why these interviews go so long because I branch out into 1,000 different side questions. It's just the way the conversations go. But since we're on the subject of wrestling philosophy is so interesting to me, and one thing that I always love to learn about is, especially early in your career, the balance of I need to work everywhere I can as much as I can to learn, and when that becomes I need to be more selective of where I work because maybe they're not as safe, maybe they don't pay as well, or maybe I need to have dates cleared so if a bigger opportunity comes my way I'm not already booked up. So for you, how did you juggle that? When did you start learning about that balance, and just can you talk about it just to help other people?
um so I think that's honestly always been a little bit of a thing in terms of okay, I guess because I like metaphors and whatnot. Um so like if you're talking to my fellow meatheads here, if you're bulking, eventually you're going to bulk too much and you're like, oh, I kind of don't like how I look. Whatever. And then you're going to cut a little bit. But hopefully, when you're done cutting, you don't just look the same as you did before you started your bulk. So you kind of like add a little bit of extra. And when there's too much fat, you start to realize, okay, we need to cut, we need to diet a little bit, cut it off. It's probably too stupid and meatheady of a metaphor, but whatever. Regardless, I digress. Um, I think it's one of those things where my first instinct when I got in was I know that it doesn't matter the payday and whatever else. Like I have like a grown up job at this time, and I'm like, I'll just get myself out there as much as possible, and I just need experience. And my trainer was even like, look, as long as you're like not agreeing to stupid shit, like as long as you're not just like taking a bunch of pile drivers and all these like crazy, like you could get yourself hurt and you just do stuff that you're comfortable with and you're okay with saying, hey, I don't know how to do that. Can we do something else? Um, I think it was one of those things. I mean, I still could tell like where like really, really bad shows were, and like if it was just like, okay, this is not going to have any value at all. But like, it was just how can I get 2 to 3 bookings every weekend, no matter what the payday was or the exclusivity or whatever I'm doing. Like, I just wanted to get bookings, and then eventually it was like, okay, now I'm booked up every weekend. And I started to go, okay, well, like, do I really want to spend all my weekends doing all these shows? Am I still getting the same? Like, if I just get a live round, like a live match in front of a crowd, is it that useful? And I started cutting back. And then you start to add more because it's like, okay, I'm commanding a little bit more money and I can, go to this place and ask for this amount and whatever, or I can ask for a good opponent. Um, I remember there was definitely like a time a couple years in where it was like, okay, if I can get a good opponent or a good payday or it's a good opponent, good payday, or
Connections.
like some kind of connection or something like that. Okay, I'll take it if I can get one of the three. And then eventually it was like, okay, I should probably get two of the three. And then now it's like, okay, like if it's not all three, like, what am I doing there, right? So I don't know. Like, I would definitely like to be a little bit more busy than I am right now, but like I can't complain because I am staying, pretty busy. Most every month, and I'm doing high quality bookings. So I think it's one of those things that, like, as you see my career progress, you'll see times where it'll get crazy busy, and then a few of the like promotions that are probably a little less prestigious will drop off and whatever, and then I'll get busier again, and then a few. So it's just like you kind of try to keep leveling up, but there's never just like this linear progression. It's always like boom, 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 and you kind of always have to re-examine and go, okay, is this something that makes sense for me still? Is this connection still good? Is there like a issue here, or was this a place that was really good when I came in, and then now it's like maybe the quality's gone down, or there's been some issues or whatever. So I don't know. I would, not to not answer your question, but I think it's kind of just like a forever thing. Like, it'll always be a thing in any wrestler's career, or it should be.
And in a lot of ways, it just depends on the scene, who you are, and what your goals are. So that makes a
Sure,
lot of sense.
sure, yeah. Like, if you're just trying to do it for fun and you don't care and you just want to do as much as possible, yeah, just take every booking that you can get. Like, do your thing. If you're, you know, if you're maybe like that was you, and then it's 10 years later, and you still want to wrestle, but you probably can't take all the bumps that you used to, but you still want to enjoy it and you want to just do the stuff that you find fun, then be more exclusive. Like, there, it doesn't just have to be from the perspective that I have, where I'm like really trying to do this wrestling thing and make it as much as possible. There, like, it's like, make it through, put it through your lens and what makes sense to you.
Plus, I think it's not a bad thing, and it can come off that way if you don't word things properly. There's levels to it. There's levels to
Yeah,
everything, but there's a lot of levels in wrestling where, you know, if you're at the bottom of the indie list, if you're the place that draws 15 people in a garage, you know what? The guys who are trying there, maybe they have a dream, maybe they're working their butts off, and that's awesome. But there are levels, and at a certain point that you can't keep going to that level because you're risking your health, you're risking your time, you're risking your wallet. So
absolutely.
over the next few months after that Chris Hero match, you started working with more like notable indie names. Mike Seidel and Eric Cannon were two of them that I noticed. And I know, Mike is the son of Matt, of course, but he's done AEW and he's done this and that. And
Brother.
yeah. Oh, did I say son?
Yeah, which is
Oh,
fucking hilarious. It's way funnier that way. I
let's
just
just
wanted to
pretend he's his
acknowledge.
son. Let's just
Yeah, he's
pretend he's
the
his
son. Yeah, the son of Matt. Uh-huh.
if somehow Matt ever did see this, he would never ever do an interview with me. So thank you for that. But Eric Cannon, he's a veteran, of the indie scene. What was it like working with those two guys?
That was a really great period of time in my career, especially like Cannon's really fucking good, but I got to work with Mike like probably half a dozen times at least. Um, so that was like really helpful. He's one of my like homies still that I talk to. Yeah, Mike is a phenomenal wrestler. I think Mike is like one of the more underrated wrestlers of the last generation or whatever, because he's had some back injuries and he's kind of slowing down now. I think it's a shame that AEW didn't do more with him and his brother. But what do I know? I'm not a billionaire, but I think that they really had something cool there if they would have kept it going with Mike and Matt. Um, he's a guy that like immediately just accepted me and took me in as his homie and gave me a lot of advice and helped me out. And I really, really enjoyed all my matches with Mike.
Do you
And
think
not to
he's
make it all about him, but Cannon is a absolutely phenomenal wrestler too.
do you think with Mike, do you think there's a certain thing that people are starting to say these days, the Chavo Guerrero effect, right? Where Chavo Guerrero was a great wrestler, but because Eddie was around, people often forget how good Chavo was. Do you think with Mike sometimes that happened with Matt, where Mike was great, but because Matt was so exceptional and became such a big name, that people kind of often overlook Mike's ability?
Maybe that's it. I think it really didn't help. He had that like really, really, really bad injury.
Yeah.
If anyone's not familiar, it's pretty crazy. I don't know what you would like Google exactly, but this guy went to do like a off the top rope. I think it was like a CZW or a Ring of Honor, maybe. I don't know, but it was like an East Coast indie in the 2000s, and they were doing like a Styles Clash moonsault or something like that off the top. It was crazy, and Mike, it went as bad as it could have gone, and Mike came down on his neck and he broke his neck. And I mean, the fact that he's like still upright and doing okay, he just had a
Insane.
kid, so good for him. I think that was probably really kind of hurt him out of the stumbling out of the blocks there, kind of thing. And then because he was starting to get some momentum there, and then I think also like I don't know, he didn't like pandemic wrestling was a little bit weird, and he didn't ever really get that like full big like push it. When people say push, there's like different levels of push because like sometimes you get like a shot, sometimes you get a lot of shots, sometimes maybe you're on a roster and it's like this looks like a push from the outside, but when you look at it, you never really like I don't know. I don't think they ever really like pushed him and Matt together that
Mhm.
much. Like they gave him a couple months on Dark and Elevation, and hey, shout out to them because we got to have a match with our first AEW match was with Matt and Mike, and they are awesome. But I just don't. I think they probably could have given it more of a chance, especially in front of live crowds and maybe on TV and whatnot. I think it maybe could have made it work, but obviously Matt's doing just fine, and Mike's doing great as just like a human. He's doing well. He has a kid and a beautiful lady, and so maybe things weren't meant to work out. And I know he does well in life at his job and whatnot. I think maybe what you said was correct as well, or maybe it was a mixture. But I also see it from like a couple tough breaks here and there. There's some really talented people that just don't quite get their just due.
Yeah, that's an unfortunate thing. Not just with wrestling, but with entertainment as a whole. Sometimes it's timing,
Yeah,
luck, the right break. And you brought up the pandemic. We won't be able to get to it today. Hopefully,
yep,
we'll be able to do a second interview in the future because that's another
yeah,
subject that I always love diving into because I feel like people in interviews love to avoid it because it's such a hard time and there's a lot of
yeah.
negativity and understandably, it's horrible away from wrestling, much less wrestling included. But at the same time, such a fascinating time, including for wrestling. You know what I mean? There's so much intrigue. Another person you wrestled, and I really want to hear about this because it's so intriguing to me. Gangrel. I got to
Yeah.
hear about how you had a match with Gangrel, how it came together. Was it just some promoter like, hey, I want to book you with Gangrel? Or like, how did that happen? How was he? What was it like to work with him?
I was actually very lucky. I got to do a whole feud with Gangrel and Paragon Pro Wrestling, and then we ended up wrestling at West Coast Wrestling Connection, the WCWC, the not cool one, but the one in the Pacific Northwest. Um, but me and Gangrel probably wrestled like 5 or 6 times, and that was awesome. Like Gangrel is so criminally underrated to me in the ring. Like best entrance music of all time, one of the coolest entrances of all time, just one of the coolest wrestlers in terms of in the ring, out of the ring. he works his butt off. I think his work rate is incredibly underrated. You look at some of the stuff that he does, even at, he's, I don't know his exact age, but he's over 50 and he's still going. Like if you watch his matches, he still does his damn thing. And he's the kind of guy that'll show up when he's hurting and everything's sore and fucked up, and then he wants you to give him a fucking concrete bump. He'll like, even if you say no, he'll feed to the outside and like make you go out there and bump him on the concrete. He's crazy.
Yeah, he's
Uh,
54 right now, and he's still out there.
54. Yeah, and he can still go. Like
Yeah,
people just think of the entrance, and he could, if he wanted to, he could just do the entrance and people would still go crazy, and that's all, that's what the nostalgia pop would get. But like
honky tonk minute.
he right, he could totally do that and he doesn't. He works his ass off, and I think he's a guy that deserves way more credit. I hope he gets like a run, like a PCO or like Christian's getting right now. Like I think Gangrel absolutely deserves that because he is phenomenal.
Absolutely. And there was always the rumors about him popping up for something with Edge. And we just saw at WWE Backlash, you saw the big Savio Vega thing. I could totally see something similar happening with Gangrel. And hopefully that would then result in a lot more interest because he's a legend, total legend.
Absolutely, he deserves it.
I'm glad you brought up Paragon because for whatever reason I left that out of my notes. I think I was so focused on a few other projects he did, but Paragon was interesting to me because I'm on the East, I'm in New England area,
Okay,
and
yeah.
to get that was kind of strange because we don't get a lot of other shows out here besides the main stuff on TV, and it just kind of came out of nowhere. And then it fizzled out pretty quickly. We talked to Todd Kenley on the channel before, and he was the guy who was with Paragon. That was the first place I saw you, I believe. It was the first place I saw Hammerstone, I think, Anthony Green, a couple other guys. How did you get in touch? How did they get in touch with you? And what was Paragon like?
I made a connection through, actually, shout out to Hammerstone, because we did a show at UCW in Utah, and then we were all hanging at Martin Casillas' house afterwards, and I don't know. I guess Hammer just saw some potential in me. Bless him, because he kind of like took me to the side later and he's like, "Hey, man, like, there's this guy. He promotes Paragon and WCWC, and I think you should like hit him up because I think he likes uh, I think you'd be like the good." You would have a good style for him. Like he likes old school TV style wrestling. He likes people that look like wrestlers. Um, and so I started talking to Paragon the next week, and eventually the guy kind of bullshitted on bringing me in for a second, and then I think by January 2016, I want to say when they started bringing me in, and so I was there until they closed down basically. But it was like a great run. Like there was a lot of really cool stuff. Like that's where I like Anthony Green, Hammerstone. Like me, I knew Hammerstone before, obviously, but like that's where we became more acquainted. Anthony Green, that's where I met him, and then that's a guy that I talk to, every week. Like and he's over there in Noah killing it right now. That's my boy. But Blake Howard now with
Oh, okay,
WWE.
yep.
Yeah, that was like, I mean, I talk to Blake damn near every day. Like that's my guy. I know you have some Ring Warriors questions for later, but just as a little preview, the reason that he's Blake Howard is for Howard Brody, who's the
Oh, I
Ring
didn't know that.
Warriors. Yeah, that was his guy. But yeah, I made a lot of really good connections. I Darren Corbin, who I'm still homies with to this day. It was a really good locker room. Like there was a lot of dudes that looked like wrestlers that were wrestling like a good TV style, which I mean, I certainly was too green to like wrestle a good high paced work rate indie style at that point. So that was kind of perfect for me. I could learn how to like kind of have a little bit of a swagger and a shtick, and uh, you know, have some of these guys kind of show me the ropes, and I think that really helped me kind of up my game, was being around a lot of people that were good wrestlers. And my first match there was with Jesse Sorensen, who I think he's another underrated guy that should have done more stuff and whatnot. And it was a really good locker room, really good times.
It's interesting because, first of all, that had to be your biggest exposure at that point by far, right? Just because it had the TV around the world. Another
Yep.
thing Todd brought up about the company was like, he said if it wasn't for like the first show or two, he thinks it would have been a much bigger hit. He said, I believe it was like the first show wasn't nearly as good as everything else that went on to be. Kind of like the XFL used to have that reputation where it's like by the end of the season, it was actually really good, but because it started off not good, it soured everybody. And I guess maybe Paragon kind of felt into that same thing. About Paragon ending, like, did you see the writing on the wall? Were you surprised by it? Were you disappointed by it?
Uh, I don't know, because the owner was like constantly saying how, like, oh, there's going to be these Chinese investors and we're close to another deal and we're just taking a break for a few months. So I think it was a good experience in that, like, there's been a lot of that since then where I'm like, all right, well, just call me when the checks clears, buddy. Where you just kind of realize not to get your hopes up about things. And there's been a million stories like that before mine in wrestling where
Yeah.
they've like, oh, okay, this is just never going to happen. But I think regardless, you got to experience it for yourself a little bit sometimes and be like, oh, okay, so that's when a guy is just kind of bullshitting you and hoping that somehow money comes out of nowhere and whatnot. But I remember at the time, uh, that I actually got heat with the promoter because he was like, well, if you want, like, I'll give you a spot on WC. But he also had been separating the locker rooms. And I was like, well, all my friends are at Paragon. So, like, I don't want to, like, leave Paragon and then you won't let me come back. And then he, like, thought I was like, oh, like, you would turn me down? Like, I'm trying to give you an opportunity. So it was like one of these stupid, like, I don't know. I just kind of learned about like when promoters bullshit you and when they like think that they're like a big deal and like try to act like Vince McMahon. Like I'm sure if you asked him, he would like still be like, yeah, like I gave Royce his start. Like I'm responsible for all the success. And you know what? God bless him.
Indie politics or something else. That's
They
for
are.
sure. All right, we don't have a ton of time left. There's a couple more questions I want to get to. This is a big one, especially knowing what you're doing today. October 17th, 2016, you went to Tokyo, Japan for DDT. Now, you talked about Japan possibly being something that you wanted to do. How did this opportunity come about? Who reached out to you, or who did you reach out to? I want to dive into this.
So I always, as a kid, loved Japanese culture. Like I watched a lot of Japanese cinema, and I was like really into all things Japan as a kid. And so then when I got into wrestling and then I learned about Japanese wrestling, I was like, oh, I want to go to Japan to wrestle. Like this, the way it's treated and the way it's respected, I was like, this is something I want to be involved in. And so um at some point, this is during my Paragon run, I was just like, I don't know how to even get to Japan, but I'm just gonna literally Facebook message every single Japanese promotion and send my stuff. And like the worst thing is they say no or they ignore it,
Mhm.
and that's not really any different from my, how it already was. So I I hit up like everyone that had like a messenger like that I could send something to on Facebook. I sent my stuff to, and eventually DDT responded and was like, no, not no, thank you, but maybe in the future. And then I was like, okay, well, they at least responded, and so I kept bugging them every once in a while. And then it was their DNA Grand Prix was my first booking over there, and I want to say like someone that they had planned on using got injured or something. So like maybe a month or two before they hit me up, and it was like one of those things where it still didn't like feel real. Like
Mhm.
even as I was like filling out like my like app visa paperwork and all this stuff, I was like, is this like all gonna be like a practical joke? And I'm just gonna show up there and they're gonna be like, but yeah, that was like a dream come true. That was like a huge, huge dream come true. I still have mad love for my DDT peeps. I saw them all at a Mania week, and it's really cool because I get to see a lot of them around at random indie bookings in the U.S. now because a lot of them will come over here and hang out for a bit. But like seeing everyone together at Mania Week, especially Dan Shokudino, I tag teamed with quite a lot, and I don't know if you if you did enough research to find this, but he took a picture for old time's sake grabbing my dick. So
I
they
didn't get
posted
that far.
they posted that on their Twitter, so that was pretty cool. I have like mad love for DDT. Was so awesome to me, and I think that's another thing that really helped up my game was training in their dojo and wrestling. Like they have so many top level guys that I have crazy respect for in the ring. So
Oh, that's so fascinating. To the fact that you were in the like because there's doing tours in Japan, going over there for a week or the 4-day loop or whatever it is. But the fact that you train now, I'm very curious. Was that your first tour where you were training in the dojo, or did that come later?
the first tour because it was like I was out there for like maybe a little over a week, and we were like wrestling pretty much every day other than the travel days, and like maybe one, excuse me, one like downtime day or whatever. So the first time there was so much wrestling that I didn't get the chance to. But then my second and third tour with DDT were I think like 2 and a little over a month respectively. So I had like a bunch of time. So then those tours, I was in the dojo pretty much every chance that I could get to train up because they do just have really high level training. And it was just I don't know, it was always like a really good experience in terms of like the trainer and the people they had in the class, just like super high level. And I don't know, everyone was so accepting, but also it was like, okay, I need to like step it up. I need to keep up. I need to do my thing. So it was like a good, like the good kind of high pressure situation, you know?
You kind of had to show that you're gonna be there and with it, and you were there for a reason.
Yeah, exactly.
Obviously, going over there, a lot of people in Japan speak English, but obviously it isn't their main language. Were there other Americans or English speakers on the tour with you, or were you the only one? And if you were the only one, who was helping you along?
No, so Guan Chulo, who his main language is not English, but he speaks quite good English. He was kind of helping out quite a bit, as well as Rekka. But like on the actual tour, the main other like English speaker, which I also don't think English is his first language, but Mike Bailey. It's
Oh,
either
okay.
English or French.
I feel like it's
Is
French might be his. I'm not certain on that
That's
though.
what I'm. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So I might have been the only English primary language, and that's barely my primary language. Uh, but uh, but yeah, me and Mike Bailey hung out quite a bit. He's a man. Seeing like he already had so much back then in terms of like how good he was. Like he was already. I was like, already like, wow, this guy is on another level. But it just still took that long for him to kind of keep building and grinding and working. And now it's like, shit, he's in the finals of Best of Super Juniors, you know?
Yeah, and for him, he had the unfortunate issue with the Canadian board, which you
Sure.
could get into that with how that hurt a lot of people over the
It did.
years.
It did. It was really painful. And so that was probably not that long after that had happened. That was like within like a year or so of that happening, I want to say, because he had just started doing DDT.
I can't, obviously everything, eventually works out with him. He is doing great today. But sometimes you think like, imagine if he was able to travel as much as he wanted to all those years in between. Like it's crazy. Because if he's this good now and this big of a name now, who knows where he could have been then? And who knows what the future holds? Like it's looking bright, I think.
Yeah.
One more thing about your trip to Japan and your DDT trips. Uh, on September 14th, 2017, you won the DDT Ironman Heavy Metal title. Easy for me to say. Was that your last match there? Because that's what I read in my research that you won it in your, which didn't seem to make sense that you won it in your last match because how would you have lost it? But that's what I read, so I'm not sure.
Yeah, no, I think that was my last match there. I won it and lost it. I won it like before the match actually started technically because they have that 20, it's like hardcore style where they have a 24-hour defense rule. So I won it before, did my entrance as champion, like came out as champion, and then I got eliminated in the match and lost it. I think the title changed hands quite a few times during that match as well. Then after I was eliminated, that was my last match for DDT in Japan. I did do the when they came to the US and they did a Mania Week show. I did do that show, but yeah, that was my last match for DDT in Japan. But that's like a pretty crazy. If people aren't familiar with that title, if you look up its lineage, it's pretty
Pretty wild.
insane. Like, yeah, for sure.
That's actually a good kind of topic to bring up. DDT obviously has tremendous wrestlers, but it also has a lot of wackiness. And, some people love that stuff. Some people don't like it, whatever. What was your stance at the time? Because, you grew up a fan of, WWE. So obviously there was a sports entertainment element to it. But also you're talking about doing Paragon, which in a lot of ways was kind of, a throwback in a lot of ways with how it was presented. Was it difficult for you to grasp or accept the wackiness, or were you all for it instantly, or is it a deal where it's not necessarily for you, but you can appreciate it?
No, I think it's a when in Rome type of situation where like there should be a time and a place for it. I
Mm-hmm.
think the issue is like it's hard if you don't like DDT creates a whole universe, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like literally they have like their own universe where everything, if you just watch DDT, it makes sense. If you take it out of that contextually and then you just show random clips, that's where you get people being like, oh, this is fake, oh, this is fucking bullshit. And it's like, well, yeah, but also if you took a random scene out of a movie, it also wouldn't make sense to you. You know what I mean? You could be like, oh, this is how could this happen? And this is a stupid movie. And it's like, yeah, well, watch the whole like 2 hour thing and then get back to me.
The
So
universe point is a great one. That's
yeah, like people like to take stuff out of context and then be like, this doesn't make sense. And it's like, well, yeah, dude, if I had you read a random sentence in a book, you wouldn't fucking get it now, would you? You'd be like, this probably, oh, what is this science fiction? It's like, well, no. So I don't know. I think there's like a time and a place. Like there's definitely like I love the DDT style. I enjoy watching it. I was teaming with Dan Shokudino. I was breaking chopsticks with my ass. I was doing all kinds of crazy shit. It was really fun. And like I think there's a time and a place for that. And then it's also really fun when I get to do blood sport and I get to be really serious. And it's like those two things should both exist and they should both as just like it would be weird though if I was like in the middle of a blood sport match and then I like put like chopsticks into my trunks and then broke them and then like hit my opponent with them. It'd be like, okay, well, what are we doing now? You know what I mean? So I think like everything is like in its place should make sense and be good. But I think there should be like we don't. It's just like with like to go back to movies, like we want to have comedy movies, we want to have action movies, we want to have suspense movies, we want to have horror movies. It just is weird if you like have them all happening at once unless there's like a cohesive idea of why or whatever.
the equivalent I always think about for that is Chikara. Chikara, for what it was awesome in that it had the over the top wackiness. It had their own cohesive storylines and everything like that. And everything they did made sense on a Chikara show. Now, if you took the guys and they started doing baseball in a Ring of Honor match, maybe it wouldn't fit and maybe it wouldn't work for those fans or at that time, but it fits perfectly for their audience in their promotion. So as long, and it's like one of the spots that get a lot of, feedback was like the slow motion spots, someone will do a slow motion punch. If you're in a company where that makes sense, where the promoter wants it, then it makes sense. The only problem I can see why it can be an issue is if you're doing it in a company, especially with a promoter who doesn't want that, then it becomes something different.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, yeah, it all may. I'll put it this way: like the people that'll be like, "Oh, this is all bullshit. It should all be serious wrestling." Look at like Suzuki, and it's like, well, Suzuki's wrestled in DDT too, and
Yeah.
Suzuki's done comedy spots before too, and he's as badass as they come. He's as legit as they come. Like, are you going to tell him that comedy shouldn't exist or something like that? It's like there's a time and a place for it. He's just not going to do it on like probably like he won't do it on like a New Japan show. He's not going to do it a blood sport
Yeah.
match. there's a time and a place for it, and comedy is great. We all like, who doesn't love to laugh? And like, I feel like a lot of those people who are like, oh, wrestling should just all be 250-pound men hitting each other, then making mean faces. Also, like, they love to watch wrestling when it's goofy. Like, the people that are like, oh, it should just be like the 80s again. It's like, yeah, but there's so many like comedy spots in the 80s
Yeah.
that still got over that people liked. It was just presented in a way that you liked it. So like, shut up.
Royce, you've been an incredible guest. We didn't get super far. We got to 2017. I knew that was going to happen. Thank you so very much. One question before we hit plugs on the way out. I asked this. I try to end every episode with this, and even when we go again, hopefully in the future, I'm going to ask the same question because it can change. You touched on that a little bit, but what does the future look like for Royce Isaacs?
I mean, my eyes right now are on those strong open weight tag titles, and then I think the natural progression from there is the IWGP tag titles is where we want to head next. And I still have a lot of singles goals and accomplishments. All my stuff right now, as far as goal wise, is pretty New Japan oriented, but you know, like the long term goal, wrestle till I'm 50 and hold the IWGP Heavyweight Championship. So that's kind of where my head's at. I know there's a lot of rungs and hurdles before I get there, but that's exactly where, you know, long term goals and planning my head is.
We've got to get out of here, but real quick on the subject of wrestling till you're 50. Do you see yourself transitioning into a non-wrestling role in the future, still in the industry, like producer or a trainer? Could you see yourself running a school, maybe like your own school? Is that something you would ever think about, or it just depends on what opportunities come and how you feel about it at the time?
Certainly, actually train a few people one on one, like small, you know, private sessions kind of thing. I like to train people. I like to teach. I come from a family of teachers, so training is definitely one of the things that I really do pride myself in and I like doing. Um, yeah, I think I like agenting as well. I have a little bit experience agenting. Um, like I like helping out with segments. I think I'm very good at finding extra little stuff that, you know, the little seasoning to really make a good gumbo. I think that I'm good in roles like that. So I would like to one day have some kind of a backstage role, whether that's an agent or producer or whatever else. And I want to continue to teach and train. I think eventually one day when I am not an active wrestler, I'd like to focus more on it where I can open up a school, because I definitely think that's one of those things where it's a big responsibility and a big versus doing a few sessions every week and whatever.
Yeah.
That's like owning a school is like a real big responsibility. So once I'm retired actively, I think my thing is I would like to conceivably move back to Colorado and give them a school where there's a, you know, a trainer that they can, you know, teach them how he did it and do it the right way. And
Build
you
up the
know,
scene.
yeah, build up the scene and give back to the scene that gave so much to me is my kind of long term goal. And then hopefully while I'm doing that, have some kind of a backstage role somewhere. So we'll see, but that's kind of what I'm thinking.
Awesome. Thank you so much. One more time, where can people check you out?
Uh, Twitter, Mile High Samurai / whatever my Japanese kanji is. But if you search Royce Isaacs,
Yeah.
you'll find me. At Royce Isaacs on Instagram, Pro Wrestling Tees / Royce Isaacs, and that's probably the only, other than my address, which I'm not giving out. I think the only ways to
Are you not going to
contact me.
share it with all of us?
And my social security now.
But yeah, and check them out on New Japan Strong. We will have links in the description for everything. Guys, be sure to follow us at Armbars Sidebar on Twitter, at Armbars and Sidebars on Instagram, and on YouTube at Armbars Sidebars. Subscribe, leave comments, give a thumbs up. It helps the channel a lot, and it can keep us growing, which in turn will hopefully also help the talent involved. Royce, thank you so very much. This was incredible. I can't wait for a potential part 2 if I'm lucky enough for it, because
No, we're
I
doing
love
it. We're for
talking with you.
sure. I'm already telling you, we'll get through the whole thing. The problem is if we wait too long between episodes, we're going to end up doing 17 episodes. But let's get back to it before too long, man.
It's on the record now, guys. We're holding them to it. But seriously, thank you so much. And until next time, guys, later.